Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm now calling to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. And before we rise to sing O Canada, which I invite everyone to participate with, I first invite our guests and their color party to come forward.
Color party, attention! Color party, quick march! Color party, halt!
And we'll now sing O Canada as soon as the music starts. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. As Colonel Guy Smith makes his way forward to the podium, I'd like to explain that tonight, as we resolved 3 weeks ago, we are thanking our veterans of Afghanistan for their service and sacrifice. Today is End of Mission Day. We're honored to have in attendance the President of Royal Canadian Legion Branch 114, Brian Ray, and the President of Branch 486, Jean Reed, as well as Oakville's ranking Afghanistan veteran, Lieutenant Colonel Guy Smith. Lieutenant Colonel, if you prefer. Lieutenant Colonel Smith's daughter, Captain Stephanie Smith, is also with us this evening, a veteran of 2 6-month tours in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Smith and Lieutenant Colonel Smith and Captain Smith hold the distinction of being one of the only father-daughter deployments to serve in Afghanistan at the same time in 2007-2008. Also with us this evening for recognition is Philip Kerstra, who returned in 2006 from serving in Afghanistan. Unable to attend, but always in our thoughts, is Edna Parker, the mother of Colonel Jeff Parker, who made the ultimate sacrifice on duty in Afghanistan 4 years ago. We're taking a moment ahead of the May 9th National Day of Honor to pay tribute to Oakville's members of the Canadian forces who served in Afghanistan. Our mission in Afghanistan was the longest active military engagement in Canadian history, spanning more than a decade, involving 40,000 soldiers and claiming the lives of 162 Canadians. With war comes sacrifice. Tonight, I want to ask for a moment of silence as we pay tribute to the families who are the strength behind the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces. The men and women who served in Afghanistan, those who gave their lives, and those who have returned home safely to our great relief. I've asked our veterans here to be here tonight to receive our thanks on behalf of all of those who have served. And before our moment of silence, I thought it would be appropriate to invite Lieutenant Colonel Smith to give us a few remarks. Colonel Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council, presidents of both the Legions, other service members, and ladies and gentlemen. Afghanistan, was it worth it? Well, that depends on your frame of reference. Mine reflects as one who served in Afghanistan, and I am humbled to receive this honor from the town of Oakville tonight on behalf of the more than 40,000 men and women who served in theater, all very ordinary citizens challenged to do extraordinary things. Many served from Oakville and our surrounding area. When Canada arrived in Afghanistan, what did we face? 31 million people in a country the size of Manitoba, fifth poorest country in the world, 30 years of conflict with 80% of the population under 15 years of age. Most had seen nothing but war. A displaced population, almost total destruction of the infrastructure and the economy. It was the most heavily mined country in the world. It had poor health. In 2002, 20% of children died of preventable diseases before the age of 5, and epidemics were rampant. Status of women. Women's rights were non-existent, and only 1 in 20 women received any kind of education. A lawless drug economy and 90% of the world's opium, and a security force in disarray. So, Canada provided a whole-of-government approach with the Canadian Forces, Foreign Affairs Canada, the Canadian International Development Corporation or Agency, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Corrections Canada. Many people don't know that. We were sent to Afghanistan to assist the Afghan government in countering an insurgency, to help build a stable, democratic, self-sufficient society and provide hope for the future. We worked with the Afghan National Security Force, both the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police. We also trained and expanded them to create security and support governance. We provided an international mentor and liaison teams, or OMLETs as they're called, to support the Afghan National Security Force in operations. We provided a strategic advisory team to provide advice to several Afghan ministries. We provided a provincial reconstruction team to reinforce the authority of the government in Kandahar province, assisting stabilization in the region, vaccinations and medical care, creating rural reconstruction like schools, roads, and dams, reintegrating refugees, assisting in youth education, and an operational battle group when required for stability operations, all within an envelope of 2,700 people. Well, how did we do? 4.8 million refugees were repatriated. Hundreds of thousands of former combatants were disarmed and demobilized. Over 100,000 light weapons were collected. 400,000 landmines were cleared. More than 6 million children were back in school, of which 2.4 million were little girls and 4.6 million little boys. The per capita income doubled in 3 years. Over 20,000 reconstruction program projects were instituted. More than 75 prosecutors, 70 public defenders, 100 judges were in place. And the Afghan National Security Force has grown more than tenfold to over 300,000 and is better trained. Now, accepting the rule of law, development of the capacity of the Afghan National Security Force, and confidence in good governance remain key in all areas, of which Canada played a key role. It was not about fighting, seizing and holding ground. It was about winning the hearts and minds of the Afghan people, accepting the government of the International Republic of Afghanistan and the Afghan National Security Force, vice the Taliban, which has largely gone to Pakistan. Our Canadian soldiers and civilians have done us proud. In operations, 100,000 deaths is a statistic, yet even one death is a tragedy. Sadly, more than 158 Canadian Forces personnel and 6 civilians have given the ultimate sacrifice, one of which was Oakville's own Colonel Jeff Parker. As well, several thousands of soldiers have been wounded and injured, both physically and mentally, that will affect their functional ability in society for the rest of their lives. Their courage and dedication has brought much pride to our country. Yes, Afghanistan is this generation's Korea. We must never forget to continue to support our Canadian Forces personnel, and in particular, their families who suffer as well as they reintegrate into Canadian society and carry on with their lives. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for your words. I think they're very important, and I hope they'll attract I now ask everybody to join in a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to our veterans, the Legion, for coming tonight. I think this was important to do, and Council and I thank you for everything that you've done for us.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Solar Party, left wheel.
Oh, we have microphones again. It's the funniest thing. All right. I will now lead Council in our opening prayer, followed by our moment of silent reflection, and then we will address the rest of the agenda for this evening. God grant us understanding and patience, that justice, truth, and honesty may be evident in our decisions. Make us mindful of the needs of the people throughout the town of Oakville. Help us govern with the wider community in mind, and so create in us a desire for progress and responsible action. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, I understand we have some regrets for this meeting.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have regrets from Councillor Dudek and Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. How do you wish to deal with your minutes of your previous meetings of February 24th, 25th, and March 17th? Councillor Adams? Councillor Adams moves. Councillor Robinson seconds. All those in favor? Opposed? The minutes are adopted. Madam Clerk, I understand we have several delegations on tonight's agenda. Would you call the delegations now?
So our first delegation is Karen Brock on behalf of Oakville Green regarding the review of the private tree protection bylaw, item 8 of the Community Services Committee meeting of March 24th.
Good evening, Ms. Brock. Thank you for joining us. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Burton and councillors. My name is Karen Brock, and I'm delegating on behalf of Oakville Green Conservation Association. Recommendations were submitted in January 2014 by Oakville Green on behalf of 9 residents' associations, a few who are here tonight, who are expressing an urgent need to address tree protection in Oakville. And thank you to the staff who have considered our submission. First of all, we want to commend the town of Oakville for reviewing the private tree protection bylaw originally implemented in 2008. Much has happened in this 5-year time frame, and Oakville has grown significantly, especially due to new development in the north, with more to come, and also intensification and infill development continues at a quick pace in older, mature, well-treed neighborhoods. Climate change, Emerald Ash Borer, or EAB, the ice storm and associated consequences have been dramatic. EAB alone is threatening 10% of Oakville's canopy. All of these things remind us of the pressure humans and Mother Nature are putting on our tree canopy. Oakville Green supported the bylaw in 2008, and tonight supports many of the recommendations in the current review. Our request is that Council votes yes to accept staff's recommendations. I think the best outcome of the 2008 bylaw has been the tracking of trees removed by the notification process. Shockingly, in 5 years, almost 1% of Oakville's urban forest canopy has been removed through this process alone. The issue is that there was no requirement for landowners to replace the value of these healthy trees. This resulted in a net loss of tree canopy. So collecting this data has been beneficial, and we see the necessity in changing the notification practice. And certainly the town has addressed that. Oakville Green is concerned that data collected since 2008 does not include trees removed due to development applications and site plan applications, and I think this confuses a lot of citizens. The DND lands is a perfect example where 160 mature trees and green infrastructure were removed, with only 140 trees slated to be replaced. This information, in our mind, is data that should be calculated, and my understanding is that all development apps and site plan apps require an arborist report, and that the plans include diagrams that show trees to be retained, removed, or cut down, and subsequently the trees that must be planted upon completion of construction. We strongly recommend that the town begin tracking tree canopy lost in these situations, and even better, retroactively calculate canopy lost in the past 5 years. We support the town's strategy in eliminating the notification process. I think this was confusing to many. Plans to regulate all trees over 15 centimeters, and I know the report said possibly 15 centimeters, and of course we do support protecting smaller trees. And using the DBH, so 15 centimeters DBH, or diameter at breast height. It's an improvement over the 2008 bylaw, and by doing so, we expect that many more trees will be retained. The key here is to preserve and protect as many mature trees as possible, because their canopy is greater, and as such, they provide greater ecological services and benefits. But yes, some trees may be removed. Therefore, it's imperative that their full value be replaced. By requirement through the town bylaw. We like the town's proposal that every 10 centimeters DBH of a tree cut down be replaced by a tree, and I might add, it should be specified the dimension of the tree. I think in the report it just says a tree, so we want it to be bigger than this. And I'm assuming that they're looking, the town staff is looking at 50 to 60 millimeters or 5 to 6 centimeters tree. So basically, it's much more calculable. I think it's impressive. People can say, yep, if you've got a tree 30 centimeters wide, let's replace it with 3 6-centimeter trees. By implementing a simple to calculate and transparent tree replacement formula, the chances will increase to retain our canopy cover with full canopy replacement value. The town's goal to achieve 40% canopy cover by 2057 is admirable, but can we achieve this with a continued net loss of canopy cover? We need to know the facts. The recent loss and damage of Oakville trees in the ice storm has provided even greater incentive for citizens to re-examine how we can best protect and enhance the canopy and trees that remain through strengthening of the private tree bylaw. Oakville Green has more detailed feedback regarding the revisions, and we'll share these with staff and council in the upcoming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Council, do you have questions? Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Michael Sika, here to speak to bylaw 2014-044, bylaw to amend bylaw 2006-174 to regulate open air burning, item 4 of the Community Services Committee meeting.
Welcome, Mr. Sika. Council looks forward to your information. And if you could angle the microphone at you, at
Yes.
yourself, or yourself at the microphone, either way.
Okay.
It'll assist everyone to hear you.
Well, good evening, everybody. I just want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak again this evening. Some of you were already present last week when I did my presentation, so I'll try to keep it short and explain my situation. There was a handout that you've all been given. Some of you have seen it before. It's a picture of the fireplace that was built next door to me last summer, and there's also a list of municipalities and what they are doing in terms of the open air burning bylaws. It was just a short, easy to read piece of paper report that I did. So what happened was I had a neighbor who lives beside me. I'm downwind from him, and whenever they used to light their those small Canadian Tire type devices, they'd only do it a few times a year, but whenever they would light it, all the smoke would come into my house, which we were on pretty good terms, and it would only happen once or twice a year, so we never really made a big deal about it. When I saw they were building this device, the structure, which must have cost thousands upon thousands of dollars, I approached them, and I told them of my concerns, that I had a feeling that when they started to burn wood, the smoke was going to come to our house, and basically they ignored us and more or less laughed at me and said there would be no problem. So when they finished the construction, as soon as they started burning, we had a summer of hell, because what happened was our lives became revolving around whether or not our windows were open. If our windows were open and they started burning, we'd have to run up through the house everywhere and close them all, because within 5-10 minutes, the house would be full of the smell of smoke, not necessarily the visible smoke. And it was all summer. They would burn wood 3 to 4 times a week from 8 p.m. till 2 in the morning. And you never knew which night it could be. So, we couldn't, if we go out at night, the windows have to be closed. The air conditioner would have to be on. Some nights we would put the kids to sleep. It was around 11 o'clock. We look outside, it's clear, open the windows. 15-20 minutes later, we smell smoke throughout the house, and I got to run around and close the kids' windows and bedrooms. And I mean, it was just an absolute nightmare. And that's the true definition of what a nuisance is. It was a loss or use of the enjoyment of my property. When you can't have your windows open at night and get fresh air in it, then how you can't enjoy your property. So when I approached the town of Oakville, initially I was told that there was nothing that could be done. Essentially the open and burning bylaw, this structure was unregulated. Bylaw couldn't do anything about it. The fire department couldn't do anything about it. So I was kind of left. I couldn't even make a phone call. I couldn't call the fire department to complain about it, because I was told there was nothing they were doing that was wrong. So that got us to the point where the bylaw was opened up. They looked at it again. Lee did a great job with his report. I want to thank him for being so patient with me and explaining what went into the report and his thought process on everything that's behind the definitions and all that. We've gotten to the point now where we've got something that was approved last week. Is it perfect for me? No, it's not perfect, but I understand why it's been done like this. Perfect for me would be a complete ban, just like a number of other municipalities in Ontario and the GTA have done. And that's what I had on that report there. But we got to the point where it brought in basically the definition of the fireplace has been brought in, and they brought in the nuisance to deal with the complaints of the smell of the smoke. We had a little bit of a back and forth about some definitions of what is nuisance. We took out, I keep saying you took out, I asked for the word excessive to be removed, and it was replaced with significant. I would rather there was nothing added. I'd rather that excessive was removed. I think that significant just adds another layer to it that isn't necessary, because you've already got your test, loss or use of enjoyment. And if you look to the common law of nuisance, it's usually just based on loss or use of enjoyment. my question is then, what becomes significant? What is less than significant? What is a less than significant amount of smoke coming into my house and into my children's lungs? Because if you're going to tell me that the threshold is significant, how can you tell me what's okay for my children? Well, I would tell you it's zero. There should be zero smoke coming in my house, zero smoke that they're inhaling. And if I don't get those windows closed, there will be something coming in. So anyways, I'm asking you to look at that again and perhaps take it out. There are no municipalities in the GTA that use the word significant. There is one significant municipality that uses the word excessive. That's Mississauga. But they have a 5-meter setback to the property and building. So the rest of them, the ones that do allow burning, most of them just have your standard clause, anything that causes a loss or enjoyment of property related to smoke or odor. So I'll leave it up to you to, decide on that. I'm okay either way. I just would like it to be easier, not have these certain levels that somebody's going to say, well, I don't think that's significant. I don't know. Again, in the other municipalities, I'll give you a quick example, the ones that do not allow burning, but if you look, Burlington, Toronto, Brampton, Caledon, Pickering, Oshawa, Ajax, Whitby, all have banned burning. There are a few that allow it, Oakville, Milton, Halton Hills, only between sunset and during the day. There's a few others. My question is, why does Oakville still feel that it's okay to burn wood? We could have a whole debate on that issue about Lee's done a great job addressing it from his job, fire and safety, and bringing in nuisance, which I understand. I had this sort of misguided idea that maybe there would be more to it, like, for example, the environmental effect, the health impact. Oakville's usually, from what I see, likes to be, more well known for its environmental policies. I don't think that there's anything good about wood smoke. I don't think there's so many. It's no different than cigarette smoke. Yet when we jump on cigarette smoke, no smoking in restaurants, no playgrounds, I've got 1,000 times the amount of volume of smoke coming at my house than a cigarette. And it just doesn't seem to be the willpower to want to address that issue. And I hope that we can maybe somehow, in the future, it doesn't have to be tonight, but look at that again and try to determine why we still think it's okay, and yet all these other municipalities have, for some reason, figured it out and banned it. Although the banning isn't sometimes the 100% of the solution either. And I think that what Lee's done is by bringing in the fining process will hopefully get some results for us. Anyways, that's pretty much everything I have to say, and I did almost my 10-minute allotment. Anyways, thank you again, and I look forward to getting this passed because I don't know how you do it. One little bylaws got me exhausted.
Thank you for bringing your information. There are questions for you.
Sure.
Councillor Giddings.
Thanks for coming out again this evening. You're right, we had a rich discussion the other evening at CSC, and we talked about nuisance and significant at length. And after the meeting, you and I spoke, and you seemed pleased about the outcome. Our fire chief said that if you call, trucks will roll, and if they roll more than twice, there is the possibility that if the condition persists, that the homeowner will be fined. And I also understand that we are going to be having a 6-month test, and the chief will report back at that time.
Yes.
So you still happy with that? I realize that it may not be quite what you were
well,
after, but you're pleased with the 6-month test and the fact that the trucks will roll?
Yes, I'd asked if, I would love to, I understand what Lee said last week, that it really isn't possible for them to show up in a less grand way. they don't have other vehicles, and they're going to come in with a fire truck. It's a nuisance complaint. It's not really fire or safety, although they can't take that chance, and I understand that. But yes, I mean, from where we were a year ago, I'm thrilled that we're able to do something. Like I said, it's not perfect. I don't know about this, if it's necessary for significant. I don't know if that'll cause any issues. I hope it doesn't.
Well, we will find out.
Yeah.
And in 6 months, we'll get that report. And with the vehicles roll, they have the method of putting out that fire. And I think, as the chief mentioned, that's what they'll be doing.
Yes.
Thanks.
Councillor Graham?
Thank you. Actually, my question did revolve around to just making sure that you understand that in 6 months, we are going to be looking at this again. It's not
Yes.
a done deal. And
Yeah.
you also understand this is kind of a balancing act too, because as much as you want to enjoy your property, this person who has this fireplace that they've spent a lot of money on probably wants to enjoy it in their property and then, have that kind of warmth too. So we're trying to find the
I
best
know.
solution
Well,
for everybody.
my
Bear with
opinion
us.
is this is entertainment. There are other alternatives, cleaner alternatives, and from what I understand,
And-
Oakville didn't necessarily have the greatest air quality when everybody was up in arms about the gas plant, and there are alternatives, clean alternatives,
And certainly know that that was part of the fire chief's report too, that they were going to pursue that through an educational
I mean, I'd love to
process.
see, I said to Tom tonight, I said, why don't, somewhere down the road, if somebody wants to build one of these things, you tell them it's going to be gas. And then in 2 years from now, everybody else that's burning wood, you bring them in. Because all they have to do is convert to a gas. In fact, the contractor, when I saw him building it next door, I was talking to him, and he said that 99% of those structures are gas insert. And he was actually quite surprised when he started going through the drawings that it was wood burning.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate your patience with us as we try and work out the best solution for everybody.
Thank you.
Any others? I wonder, Mr. Sika, do you recall the information at the committee meeting about the fact that there were more complaints about burning in Burlington than in Oakville, even though Burlington has the ban and we haven't?
I think that was true, yes. Or very close. It was 100, I think 100 and something.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks very much for coming
Okay,
with your
thank you.
information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Catherine Cavasalis, here to speak to the review of the private tree protection bylaw, item 8 of the Community Services Committee meeting.
Welcome, Mrs. Cavasalis. We look forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. It's been a number of years since I've been before you to speak on this issue, and as some of you will know, I was on the Mayor's Advisory Panel on Tree Protection in 2007 and put before you a report of, hopefully, I guess you'd call it bipartisan, people who were very much interested in property rights, Max, and people who are interested in seeing trees more as public good and trying to find a balance there. And I have to compliment you. I know it's been a long time coming back to this because it was very contentious. I'm glad that you are able to do it now, and I do think that it is time for us to revisit it now that we do have some numbers. And I would like to say and reiterate what Karen Brock said, is that we need more and better data. We were promised another U4 report, another assessment of the forest as a whole. That hasn't been done, and I know this is a budgetary issue, but it really needs to be done so that you can make decisions based on good science. Today, the United Nations released another in its series on from the International Climate Change Group, this time on preparedness of communities and governments, and looking at how we are going to be able to adapt to what is climate change happening all around us. And this tree protection is really very minor, and I don't want to make it bigger than it is, but it is indicative of our ability to look at parts of our ecosystem and ecosystem function that protect us and make the land more resilient, particularly protecting water and reducing energy. The numbers that are being put forward by staff are actually numbers that were in that original report by the committee that I was part of, that 15 centimeters which is 6 inches in diameter. And I think that is a reasonable place to be at. We could go smaller, but if that's where they want to begin, that's a good place. And again, this is going to be an iterative process. I realize this is going to go through a long period of public consultation, and it's probably not time to discuss and debate those numbers here, because it really does need to be vetted through that process. I really think it's important. The bylaws is really just one portion of this, to look at the official plan and looking at how to protect lands. And I wish Kathy Duddick were here, because I really thought that her suggestion that you need to, looking at sort of the south portion of Oakville, where you do have significant canopy cover, to figure out ways to protect what you have, that needs to be written in to plans, so that when developers come in, they can say, you know, this is the look of this land, and that needs to be paid greater attention to, so that you're not losing some of these significant heritage trees. It's not an easy process. I certainly had my eyes open the first time through to understand just how divisive this can be. And it isn't something, I think, that significant, that there's more important things, that protecting larger swaths of land are probably a greater issue than protecting this 1% of canopy. But we can do it, and we should do it. Otherwise, it's just you're cutting yourself. It's a trickle decay of your forest. So tonight's just a beginning. I'm very grateful that you are making those first steps, and I hope this time around the public is less fearful of what this means. I think it hasn't been as painful a process as it was expected, and that in the next iteration it can become a better process for everybody involved. Anyway, it's thank you for this beginning.
Thank you for your information. Are there questions for Mrs. Kavasilis? Thank you very much for coming. Madam Clerk, are there more delegations? Thank you. Council, I'll turn your attention now to the standing committee reports, and I'd ask you, does anyone have any separations for the Administrative Services Committee report? Would anyone move and second it? Councillor Johnston moves. Councillor Lapworth seconds. All those in favor? And ASC is adopted. Now, on CSC, let me ask for separations. Councillor Adams?
I'd like to separate item number 4, please.
All
That's
right.
the open air burning bylaw item.
Any other separations? Councillor Demoff?
I know we were going to get a presentation on the active transportation, which is now going to be made at the next meeting. Do we need to separate that item or not?
No. I should explain that at committee, I had hoped that we could have the active transportation plan presentation at council, so that the public at large via town TV and the rest of council could enjoy it. But the staffer who put his heart and soul and mind and muscle into this and has done so much on it, Chris Clapham, is ill and unable to be here tonight. So staff has suggested that we adopt it, and we will bring him back as part of a regular agenda for a presentation, the way we have done many times for departmental updates and so on. So thank you for that, Councillor Demoff. If there are no other separate, Councillor Adams?
I was going to ask you about the same thing about the private tree bylaw. I understood the committee had wanted to see the presentation tonight as well.
So what is the will of council on that? Do you want?
If staff are prepared to do so, then I would appreciate it, because I was unable to see that part of the meeting.
All right. Thank you. So we're separating item 5 as well. Any others? Then perhaps a motion for the balance of the report. Councillor Robinson? Councillor Demoff?
It's not item number 5, though. It's item number 8.
Item number 8. You're right. Thank you for that. So I had a motion from Councillor Robinson for the balance of the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Johnston? All those in favor? That is, those against? That's carried. So now let's turn to the first separation, which is the open air burning item number 4. Councillor Adams.
The separation is to introduce two amendments, which I believe are minor. The first is to, from the recommendation from the committee, delete the phrase and inserting the word significant in its place from the CSE recommendation. So that's removing any reference to excessive or significant. And this would be consistent with what we see in Halton Hills and in Milton, where both allow open air burning under a permitting process. And for example, in Milton, they say no fire is to cause odor or smoke to cause discomfort to persons, hazards to health, nor loss of enjoyment of normal use of property in the immediate area. And it continues, obtaining authorization to have an open air fire does not relieve an owner from his or her obligation to ensure that smoke does not interfere with the ability of neighbors to enjoy their properties or conduct their business without disruptions. So nowhere in there does it use a word like significant or excessive. Halton Hills is similar. It has a permit system where permit holders are allowed to have a fire, but the fire does not is not allowed to cause discomfort to others, nor loss of enjoyment to normal use of property, etc. So again, there's no reference to significant or excessive or any other adjective of that nature. So to be consistent, I'd like to remove that. That's the first amendment. The second is to incorporate a due date back for a report from our staff, and that is that staff report back on the impact of the changes to the bylaw in December of 2014. If staff come back earlier, that's fine, but I thought that December would be the end of any burning season that we would see in 2013, and it puts it outside of the election period of October. So with those two amendments, I'd be happy to move the entire item.
Councillor Khan seconds. Councillor Demoff?
Question of staff, if I could.
Certainly.
Some municipalities require permits for the open air burning, and Councillor Adams just referenced other municipalities. And I'm wondering why in our bylaw we're not looking at requiring people to get a permit, if for nothing else that it would provide an opportunity for an education and for the fire department to ensure that everything is meeting code, but also from an education component to say this is, you know, what our bylaws are and what expectations are and that type of thing.
Chief Grant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have not suggested a permitting process, and in fact, we had very restricted areas that we were to respond to with this report with respect to the bylaw. There was a discussion of that during the previous bylaw process, and it was felt at the time that the quantity of applications that would be made and the number of visits that would be made by staff created a far more onerous issue than, in truth, the very few complaints we have around open burning. The main purpose for the permitting process in municipalities like Milton and Halton Hills relates to the fact that 98% of their open burning is clearing brush or burning spring growth off farmers' fields, and there is a necessity to make sure that those types of piles are properly located, that the burning is occurring in the appropriate weather conditions so that it does not get out of control and end up extending across multiple farms or into buildings. It was never really intended, even there, for somebody wishing to have a small recreational fire in their backyard. And while it does get used for that purpose, in consultation with those fire chiefs who are all part of our mutual aid system, it's the cost-benefit analysis is not positive on that type of thing for them either. While I do agree that public education of these people is important, and that's going to be a key focus of what's going forward with this bylaw. The presentation the other night indicated the first response with our vehicles, they would be handed a completed checklist which details all the requirements of the bylaw and shows those areas that they are not in compliance with the bylaw, along with a paragraph that suggests exactly what Mr. Sika was saying tonight, that you can be in complete compliance with the bylaw if the smoke is bothering your neighbors. Open air burning is a privilege in Oakville, and we will be putting the fire out. If that doesn't work, then the second visit by our vehicles will bring into play a response by a fire prevention officer, independent of the fire trucks, in his own vehicle, not a big red fire truck, and delivering a written warning to the property owners explaining that they're in contravention of the bylaw and why, and time to have a full educational session with them on the alternatives. And we will be strongly selling natural gas and propane alternatives when we go to these homes, if that's the appropriate answer for them. So we believe we're building targeted public education in and not creating another process in a system to stop many people in Oakville now who have a way to enjoy a small fire in the yard in the evening or in a structure that they built around their pool. We're getting no complaints from them, and we think that this is the best way to target the problem and not create more difficulty for all the people that aren't creating a problem.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor, is that enough?
Yeah, so the only municipalities that have this are municipalities that have more rural type settings that require permits, so there's no urban settings that require permits for open air burning then?
The larger urban cities like Mississauga, Brampton, even Burlington, they have a ban on open burning in the southern area, and they have a permitting system in the north because it's intended for the farm community and clearing. But I'll remind council that a ban simply means that when they arrive at the scene from a complaint, they're going to put the fire out. There are just as many occurrences of backyard fires in Burlington, in fact more than there are in Oakville. And this ban is a little bit of a misnomer in the fact we don't have helicopters flying around looking for fires, or, you know what I mean? It's all about education and making people understand. And Mr. Sika has done a great deal of research, but I need to draw your attention to the fact that in his particular case, we have a building with a fireplace in it, and if you looked at the drawing, if you put 3 walls on that thing, it's the same as having a fireplace in your house. And in speaking to the chief fire official in Brampton and Mississauga, neither one of them believe that they would consider that open burning with respect to the fact that it's a fireplace in a structure built under the building code. Now, we're working right now. Oakville has been leading the charge in a number of areas. One of the most recent was our drilling operation for the underground water source that hit natural gas. We changed provincial legislation there. We are actively currently seeking a written interpretation from the Office of the Fire Marshal that any exterior facing fireplace is in fact open burning. And whether it's in the side of a house or in a gazebo, and I have verbal confirmation that we're going to get a positive response. It takes a month or 2 to get something in writing from the Office of the Fire Marshal, but I think that will add in solving some of these problems.
So I'm wondering, when you're coming back to us anyway,
Yes.
You're talking about sending out the fire department twice where there's an issue, which is going to have a cost to it.
Yes.
And advising them about the use of natural gas. It would just seem to me that I'm not trying to create more paperwork for residents of Oakville by any stretch, but as opposed to the fire department going out to inspect everyone that wants to do open air burning, if there was a way to have some kind of permitting process for a small fee, but it would give you the opportunity to make those suggestions and education before it goes in. I don't have the answer right now, but I'm wondering if you could perhaps take a look at that as part of what comes back to us in 6 months.
Absolutely. We could speak to that issue in our report in December on whether we felt that there would be the appropriate impact from that and whether it would solve the problem. Absolutely, we could look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Adams.
I just wanted to thank our staff for the work that they've done, and in particular the chief. I think the method that you've created here in this proposal is a very good one, and I think it'll get better compliance than what we see in Burlington and other places where there is a complete ban. Famously, I've told this story before, and for those who have heard it, I'm sorry, but having walked the beaches with the mayor of Burlington and seen a fire being burned right on the beaches, right in the center of Burlington, so to speak. And he said, yeah, we've got this ban, but shrugged his shoulders and it happens. And I looked at the statistics, and there are over 100 cases of the fire department in Burlington being called out each year for that kind of thing. So they've got problems in enforcement. So the ban doesn't do everything. And I think the quick penalty system that is being proposed here is going to be much more effective. So I look forward to seeing the impact report when it comes back. And certainly if the staff can report on those other issues, the permitting process concept, I think that would be helpful for us as well.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I wonder if I could ask legal staff to advise council on the pros and cons of deleting the word significant from the clause as proposed by the councillors.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Burton. I think as Councillor Grant has pointed out, nuisance is really an area of balancing competing interests. And on the one hand, you have a party that wants to enjoy their property, and on the other hand, you have another party who feels that that use is unreasonably interfering with the enjoyment of their property. And when you have competing interests like that, as you do notoriously in nuisance, it's always useful to have reference to some objective standard to know whether or not a particular use is or is not unreasonable. And so that's why I think staff initially came forward with the recommended wording of excessive, because there was a standard that staff could look to determine how to weigh those competing interests. And as Councillor Giddings has pointed out, I understand there was a very robust discussion at the committee on this very point. And I'm always quick to discourage council to draft bylaws on the floor of the council chamber. However, my recommendation would be to endorse the recommendation that came from your committee, which would be to maintain the word significant, if only to maintain some objective standard to help staff weigh the reasonableness.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Councillor Khan.
Thank you. First of all, I don't know, am I the only one that's perturbed about Councillor Adams repeatedly reminding us about his long strolls on the beach with the Mayor of Burlington? I just want to refer maybe council and the rest of our staff and council. The leading case on nuisance was a Court of Appeal decision in 2011. It was called the Antrim case. And exactly what our council said was that case determined that in our modern society, we have to look at competing interests. And in fact, they said that the law is not intended to remedy trifles or redress petty annoyances. So, by the way, this was a unanimous decision. And the major holding in that case was that for something to be the tort of private nuisance, it has to be a substantial interference. So the court has already recognized that a nuisance has to be substantial. For us to put in excessive or significant, we're actually changing the law by saying significant, substantial interference. It's already incorporated in the law. We don't need to add anything else. We don't need to add any more adjectives to it. The other thing is the court said, well, how do you determine whether or not something is substantial interference? And they put a test out. The test is whether an interference is substantial, court apply the standard of an ordinary member of the community with normal sensitivity and temperament. I would think that our fire department are people with normal sensitivity and temperament. Leave the discretion to them. In any event, this will come back in 6 months and we'll evaluate it, but don't change the law.
Councillor, at committee, we had advice from council that there's a distinction to be drawn between actions on the private side for nuisance and actions on the public side where we regulate. And taking your words, would you have any difficulty substituting for significant substantial?
Yes, because then you're saying substantial interference. It's already incorporated. You don't need to redefine it. It's in the definition itself.
So the nature of my question is, legal counsel gave us to understand that these two areas, private and public, aren't necessarily the same. And if I understood you correctly, you may be reading a private case?
The case that I'm reading actually spelled out the distinction between private and public nuisance and qualified both of them as substantial interference.
Before I go to Councillor Grant, I wonder if our council has any comment on the legal advice we're receiving from the member of council.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I'm not, I think, agreeing with respect with the councillor that this bylaw would purport to change the law of nuisance. What we're trying to do is have reference, as I said, to an objective standard. I believe what needs to be clarified as well is that the municipality does not have any jurisdiction to regulate the area of private nuisance. That's where one neighbor is complaining about the use of the other neighbor's property, and there's a cause of civil action there where damages arise, where it's strictly from one party to another. Municipalities under Section 128 of the Municipal Act only have authority to regulate with respect to public nuisances, and that's what this bylaw does. So I would just repeat my previous answer.
Well, but you might want to enlarge on the word public there, because at committee, we were given to understand that in order to rise to the level where the public power can be exercised, there had to be more than one complainant, or there had to be a possibility that more than one person was being affected by it. And we had a long discussion about this. I, like our council, am reluctant to, to make these changes on the floor. You know, the argument that we'll look at it again soon cuts both ways. I don't know why we can't go with what our professional staff, after well-considered work, have given us and see if it will suit. And if it does not suit, you can do what you like then. But I'm in your hands. Councillor Grant?
I was kind of going along the same path in my thinking. We're talking about a modifier for the word smoke, and we have one of the best legal teams in municipal law telling us that we need a modifier of some sort. And then we hear from the fire department that, basically when the firefighters arrive, they're going to look at this situation and see, is this something we would want in our own backyards, and make a determination from that. So it doesn't matter if the word is, anything other than say, well, purple. If it's purple smoke, then okay, we'd know. If it's blue smoke, go away, that's fine. But what we're talking about here is that the fire department knows that if there is smoke there, they're going to go and take a look at it. We know that we need a modifier because we have our legal team telling us there has to be a modifier for the word smoke. And we know that in 6 months, the fire department's coming back to tell us, well, here's what we found, and here's what we're doing, and here's what everything else is going on with the different permits and other ideas in different municipalities. So I'm not sure why, after spending close to 55 minutes to possibly an hour in committee, we're looking at modifying it again when we've already given marching orders to the staff to go ahead and see what's going on and try and figure out if this is going to work for us. And it makes no sense to me that we're sitting here again reopening all these old discussions when we know that we need a modifier. The fire department's going to do their best job to figure out if it's excessive or significant or whatever, and we can work this out, and we'll know in 6 months if it works or not.
All right. Councillor Khan again.
Question from Chief Grant, for Chief Grant. Sir? If we remove the word excessive, significant, substantial, is that in any way going to affect the way you do your job?
I don't believe it will affect the way our staff does the job. I think it may, my only thought would be it would make it a little more difficult for the public perhaps to understand why the fire was extinguished, but I don't know that for sure. I'm going to go along with what Councillor Grant said. Our staff are going to arrive on a scene, and if it's their view that this fire is disturbing the neighbors, the smoke and odor of it, they're going to be asking the neighbors to put it out. I will be conveying to my staff what I believe to be the feeling of council from being involved in this debate, and that is that they don't want neighbors to be bothered by the smoke from other people's fires in their backyard. So I think we'll be taking a fairly firm approach to it. On the other hand, I can't dismiss the legal advice from both the city solicitor and the associate city solicitor, who suggested to me as we drafted this that it's appropriate to have some qualifier built into the bylaw.
Thank you, Chief Grant. Any other discussion? Would you like me to put the two amendments separately to you?
Yes, I think it'd be useful to do it separately.
All right. The first amendment is to delete the word significant. All those in favor? Opposed? That amendment fails. The second amendment is to change the due date from 6 months to specify December 2014. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. And now the item itself. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Now that brings us to item number 8. And Darnell, you're the presenter.
I am going to start off. I
All
have
right.
my colleague, Mr. Chris Mark, Director of Parks and Open Space, as well with me this evening. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it is my pleasure to present to you this evening the private tree bylaw and its commencement for a public engagement for its review. I will be starting the presentation this evening. I'll get about halfway through, and Mr. Chris Mark, Director of Parks and Open Space, will carry on from there. Oops. Let's just start over again here. This is not the presentation that I was looking for, so bear with me 1 second. I apologize for this. Yeah, but that's not the presentation that, so podium user. I'm sure we'll get there. This looks more appropriate. Thank you. So, off we go. Turning to livable Oakville, the town's official plan, we find our environmental sustainability objective, which essentially says Oakville is seeking to maintain the existing urban forest and to progressively increase its urban forest to achieve a canopy cover of 40% town-wide over the life of the plan. So how do we do this? We have a number of policy and strategy documents. Looking back to 2006, we had the U4 report, Urban Forestry Report, that really shone the light on the fact that a healthy canopy within a community helps to achieve a healthy community itself. We also have the 2008 Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, and most recently, this council approved the North Oakville Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan in 2012. Also within our toolkit, we have a number of standards and programs. This council also endorsed a new planting standard for our street trees, including new soil standards as well. We have our 2014 Woodlands project. Top of mind for everybody is our EAB program. And certainly annually, the town plants a number of new street trees throughout its community. On the education and advocacy side, our Parks and Open Space Department certainly reaches out to the community and a number of clubs for planting new trees, because we certainly need the private side to plant trees as well as the public side. And of course, last but not least, we have a number of regulatory devices, the public and private tree bylaws, and that is the focus of this evening, and it's really a commencement of the private tree bylaw that is underway at present. Of course, all of these are serving to grow our canopy overall throughout the community. So before I start the discussion this evening on the private tree bylaw, I think it's important to get into focus what is a private tree bylaw matter and what elements are exactly exempt from the private tree bylaw or subject to other legislation. That certainly has been a discussion point for many of our community members as the landscape within our community changes, either by individuals simply looking to remove trees or land developments moving forward within our community. So the private tree protection bylaw essentially applies to any person who's looking to remove a living tree or trees from their land simply because I want to, or to facilitate reasonable improvements. I'll say adding a small deck, perhaps putting in a new pool, or maybe a garden shed, those elements that tend not to attract a building permit. When we look inside our bylaw, you'll find that there are a number of exemptions. Trees that are less than the regulated diameter breast height, currently sitting at 20 centimeters. Maintenance work, certainly a homeowner can prune or trim the branches of their own tree. Rooftop, interior courtyard, or solarium trees, exempt from the private tree bylaw. Trees within a nursery, persons acting under the Surveyors Act or under the Electricity Act, and certainly orders issued under the Property Standards bylaw, all exempt within the tree bylaw itself. Additionally, matters approved under a building permit or matters approved under the Planning Act. Site plan, subdivision, things of that nature. They all go through another legislative process, be it the building code or the Planning Act. That's usually where a lot of discussion ensues. So let's talk just for a brief moment about private trees and development. Under the current bylaw, there are exemptions, as I mentioned earlier, and they originate from the Municipal Act. They're essentially that authority that allows us to pass a private tree bylaw also sets out certain exemptions that bylaw will cover. There's a lot of discussion around this, and perhaps it's the least understood element within our community. Tree removals or replacements through a land development proposal is dealt with through that planning process that moves it forward. So site plan and subdivision, as somebody moves forward and says, I would like to redevelop the land in this way, plans are presented and they will show tree removals that go coincident with that approval. The public does need the clarity and to readily understand the implications of a proposed development plan and to have certainty that what is proposed for preservation will in fact be achieved. And they also need to understand that once a plan is approved, if there are tree removals that are part of bringing that plan forward, that approval will set that into motion. Through the adoption of the North Oakville Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, we have a guide for land development for developments north of Dundas Street. Essentially, it was a report that said, here are the state of affairs for our lands north of Dundas Street, and as land develops, these are the prescribed targets that we expect these developments to achieve for planting new canopy. We need a similar evidence-based criteria for redeveloping lands within our existing neighborhoods south of Dundas Street. So how do we improve this particular element that is not a private tree bylaw matter, but we need to improve the visuals or the details on proposed developments as they move forward. We clearly heard that when some recent developments like the D&D lands moved forward, that the community wanted great clarity and to understand when a plan was approved, what did that all entail and include? And what will it look like in the future? So an update to the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan is intended to give that clarity as to what are the expectations for land developments south of Dundas Street. Again, this is not a private tree protection bylaw matter, but we do need to establish those tree canopy objectives for lands south of Dundas Street. When the North Oakville Urban Forestry Strategic Management Plan moved forward to this council and it set out those canopy targets for the north, those targets were referred back to staff to use and to apply for the land south of Dundas Street. And I think at CSC I had stated that that was certainly an admirable thing to do in the absence of any other targets that came out of the 2008 Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan. But as mentioned earlier this evening from some of the speakers, it is time to get on with updating that plan so that we do have that evidence-based targets for applying. So now, let's talk about the private tree bylaw. The private tree bylaw came into effect in this community on October 1, 2008. There was a high degree of consultation with the public. There was a number of workshops set up, several staff reports, if we all remember, in bringing that forward to this community. The resulting bylaw introduced some tree removal control that still allowed the owners to annually remove a limited number of trees from a lot. We will refer to that later as the notification process, or as commonly referred to by a number of our public, the free trees that are allowed to be removed from their property. So why review the bylaw now? It has been 5 years since this new bylaw for this community has been put into play. It is time to look back at its performance. Was it meeting the objectives that this council and community thought were highly desirable at the time? And if not, where do we make the changes? We had direction from council in 2013, I believe, to do this undertaking. And certainly we have received some comments from the public that it is time to update this bylaw. So there was a working group of staff that was put together that looked at the bylaw, looked at municipal comparators across the board, and there are a number of areas that we would suggest that need improvement. And presenting these to you tonight, we are simply seeking your endorsement to move these out to the public for a fulsome public engagement. So certainly our viewing audience at home, this is just the start of the private tree bylaw review. This is not the conclusion. We will be seeking their input on a number of proposed elements here and then bringing these back to council in June of this year. So we're looking at a proposal to change the definition of a regulated tree. Some information regarding the identification of boundary trees. We're going to chat tonight a little bit about the notification and permit process, compensation. We're going to talk about enforcement. The bylaw exemptions I've already talked about. That was the first lead in so that we had some clarity. Private tree bylaw, issues related around development. So what are we suggesting? Definition of a regulated tree. Back in 2008, 20 centimeters was the selected size of a tree that would be deemed to be a regulated tree. Certainly trees in the range of 12 to 20 centimeters offer environmental benefits. They provide a canopy, and when we change the planting standard for our street trees, we do expect to achieve a greater canopy at an earlier age in a tree's life. So staff felt it is fitting that at this time we look at changing the regulated size from the 20 centimeters down to 15 centimeters. That does mean more trees come into scope with the private tree bylaw if in fact this carries through to a final approval by council. Boundary trees. There was some press certainly last summer on boundary tree issues in a number of other municipalities when it came to boundary tree matters. Oakville, I think we can certainly pat ourselves on the back that when you passed your bylaw, there was a requirement in there for written consent of an adjacent property owner when and if there was an application for a boundary tree. The Forestry Act is pretty clear on what a boundary tree is. The only issue here is for staff, how do we identify when a boundary tree actually exists? We have many different plans that come in. Engineers portray them in different manners, everything from a small circle to represent a tree to some that try to represent the tree in the appropriate way. And identifying that it is a boundary tree on a plan can be highly problematic. And we have had a few cases where it came in on a plan, it was suggested that it's not a boundary tree, there was a dispute from a neighbor that it was a boundary tree, two surveyors had different opinions, so I think we need some teeth within our bylaw that allows us to ask for a professional surveyor's opinion when boundary tree matters are questionable. At this point, I am going to hand it off to Mr. Chris Mark. He's going to carry it on from here to talk about the notification and the permit processes.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. Within the private tree bylaw, there was a notification process and a permit process. The notification process that is currently within the bylaw allows a landowner to remove 4 regulated trees, regulated being 20 centimeters and 76 centimeters. They can remove those trees from a property on an annual basis, up to 4, through the submission of a notification form. That can be simply as a fax by the owner into the town. Ideally, within the bylaw, that notification form should reach us 24 hours before the tree is removed. There's a permit process also involved in the bylaw for a 5th tree that a homeowner would like to remove between 20 and 76 centimeters in a year. There's a permit for that, as well as any tree that's greater than 76 centimeters. A permit is required. And the permit fees for a 5th or more trees up to 76 centimeters is $231.50 currently, and $578.90 if you would like to remove a tree beyond 76 centimeters. When we looked at the 5 years that the bylaw has been in place, we looked carefully. I'm sorry. Sorry. There I am. Under the notification process, when we reviewed it, the current process for notification forms does not really encourage the planting of trees to compensate for the loss of the trees. Through the facts of the notification form, it comes in, people can take the trees down as long as it's within that 20 centimeter to 76 centimeter range. Currently, through the notification process, there's really no incentive for homeowners to maybe give that second sober thought about removing the trees. You could put a fax notification in immediately, as opposed to any modifications that you may want to take to preserve the trees. And through the process of reviewing over the last 5 years in the canopy loss in that 27 centimeter to 76 centimeter range, we've noticed a significant canopy loss with no opportunity for tree planting or any compensation discussion with the homeowner. This thing does not want to advance. So when we've looked at the over 5 years for the bylaw being in place, we've looked at the total canopy loss through the notification process. And as you can see from the chart in front of you, we've lost over 329,000 square meters of canopy through the notification process over the last 5 years. And that's from notification forms that have come into both the forestry section as well as development engineering. When we're looking at the trees that have been removed over the 5 years through the notification process, looking at 2013 specifically, there was 865 trees that were removed through the notification process. And that's taking out any hazard trees or EAB infested trees as well. The size class is broken down there for you. Between 20 and 40, 576 trees are removed. Between 41 and 60, there was 214. Between 61 and 76, there was 57 trees removed. And beyond 76 centimeters, which requires a permit, there was 18 permits that were granted. So out of the total number of trees, 847 trees that were removed in 2013 up to November the 1st, we lost approximately 1% of the town's canopy based on the notification process. In 2013, we just looked at, we issued 18 tree permits. The tree permit requires staff to go out and and actually meet with the resident to evaluate the tree and determine whether a tree permit is applicable or not. Of the 18 permits that were issued in 2013, the canopy lost from those trees being removed from those permits was 1,033 square meters. In issuing the tree permit, we can issue a tree permit with conditions or without conditions. Generally, tree permits are often issued with conditions, and that condition can often be a request for replanting, or it can be compensation in the terms of the value so that we can plant other trees within the town to compensate for that loss. So when we went out and we had a discussion with the resident regarding their request to take the tree down, the tree permit was granted, but we actually did have an ability to receive compensation back, and based on the tree permits that were issued in 2013, we actually replaced that 1,033 square meters of canopy with 1,428 square meters of canopy. So when we do have the opportunity to engage people on the removal of their tree, we have the opportunity to receive compensation, or in fact provide them other avenues regarding not taking the tree down. So it opens a discussion that we can have with the homeowner when there is a tree permit. So in terms of options to improve the notification and the permit process, some options to improve could be reducing the number of trees that could be removed annually. Instead of 4, could be reduced to 3, 2, 1. Increase the regulatory clock from annually to biannually or longer. Subject all trees to a permit process. And we could also establish an appropriate fee structure, such as offering a reduced fee for a fixed number of trees of, say, 1 to 2. And the remaining removal of fees for the tree removals would be in line with the town's user fee policy. Our initial staff recommendation from the staff team that's looked at the notification, and particularly the notification process, is that we should look to be subjecting all regulated trees to a tree permit, all private trees to a tree permit. That would be taking it down to the 15 centimeters that Mr. Lambert previously explained. We should look at implementing a scalable permit fee, such as the first couple of trees between 15 and 40 could be $50 per tree, and the remaining fees to be in line with a user fee policy, expected to be ranging from $200 to $1,000 a tree, depending on its size. In terms of compensation, compensation is maybe one of the least understood aspects of the bylaw. It's somewhat vague within the bylaw, and the bylaw indicates that a designated official may issue a permit with conditions, but not including limited to the requirement of replacement trees. In our review of the bylaw, we feel that the bylaw needs to indicate how compensation will be calculated. There has to be greater transparency between the calculation of the compensation requirement that's within the bylaw to the actual compensation that the resident will be charged if they do wish to take the tree down. But having said that, to date, staff have applied a variety of industry methods for determining what is suitable on a case-by-case basis for the compensation. Some options to improve the compensation process would be a range of methodologies we could consider to enhance the clarity on how the compensation is to be determined. And whatever we move forward with, we should have that to be a very simple and straightforward process. Our initial thoughts on this would be to adopt a simplified replacement formula of 1 replacement tree for every 10 centimeters of tree diameter that is actually removed. We feel this would provide a reasonable compensation and a method that most homeowners can calculate themselves as part of their decision prior to making an application for a permit. Enforcement. Presently, the bylaw is enforced by Parks and Open Space as well as our development engineering team. Our staff comment is that in the review of the bylaw, it's really Parks and Open Space forestry staff that deal with the majority of private tree bylaw infractions, while development engineering staff tend to deal with more compliance on tree preservation plans that are brought in. When the bylaw was introduced in 2008, we didn't have Service Oakville. Since that time, we've introduced Service Oakville as the main point of contact. One of the concerns we do hear from our residents is they're not sure who to contact when they have a question regarding a tree. And often they're in a hurry, it's a rush, there's a chainsaw going, and they want to talk to somebody as soon as possible. So with the introduction of Service Oakville, and forestry, the forestry section has been fully integrated into Service Oakville. We have fully trained staff on Service Oakville who can manage all the requests for services pertaining to the tree bylaw matters. Service Oakville reduces confusion to the public, as Service Oakville has become the one point of contact for their concerns. Service Oakville will monitor and adjust the service as necessary to ensure we're easily able to engage the town services when required. In terms of the public consultation, this is just the beginning of the discussion regarding an update to the private tree bylaw. We think it's appropriate to have two public meetings. Now we have public meetings scheduled for April the 23rd at Queen Elizabeth Park Community Centre in the Black Box Theatre, as well as April 24th here at Town Hall. We're also suggesting we begin to hold a stakeholder forum. We did receive a submission from Oakville Green along with a number of resident association presidents. That was received some time ago, and we think it would be appropriate to re-engage those folks again to get further information and feedback on the bylaw and the presentation that you've received here this evening. We're also looking at using the town website, social media, and notices as well. We're looking for some online comment and feedback capability, looking at an email address to collect comments at privatetreebylawreview@oakville.ca, so we can get comments back from the broader community if they're not able to attend one of our public meetings. And that, Mayor Burton and Council, is our presentation for this evening, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, if questions are wealth, you're a wealthy man. Councillor Demoff, Councillor Khan, Councillor Giddings, and probably more to come.
Thank you very much. And I know Councillor Duddick and I spoke before the meeting, and I know she had a number of questions, and we both really appreciate all the work that you've put into this. I have a few questions. One of them goes back because we actually put in the original request for report, and when I go back to that, staff was to review the private tree bylaw and tree preservation plan, and there seems to be a lot in here about the tree bylaw, very little about the tree preservation plans, because it seems to be somewhat outside what's in this report. So there were a few things that had been in that, including failure rates during the warranty period and the type of things that really don't apply to the tree bylaw but to the tree preservation plan. So I'm wondering, is that going to be coming to us separately, or how are we dealing with that portion of the request for report?
Through you, Your Worship, that is something that will be addressed in the update to the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan. We're also coming back to Council to talk about the North Oakville Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan and its application of the new planting standards in the communities in the north, which we will talk about the lesser failure rates that we are now seeing occur with the new planting standard that's being put into play.
Okay, so you'll have to remind me again, when is that? Because that seemed somewhat that it will be coming at some time in the future. Do we have timing for that portion of it?
For the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, that'll be a 2015 undertaking, which may actually conclude in 2016. That's a fairly lofty undertaking. The report back on the North Oakville Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan is something that I envision you'll be seeing most likely by the end of 2014.
So the tree preservation plan portion of this is not going to be dealt with then until 2015, is that right?
Correct, in the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan update.
And so when we do that, I know Councillor Duddick brought up the issue of actual modeling as opposed to a paper plan, which is what we ran into with the DND lands, is that people couldn't visualize what was actually going to happen. So will those kind of things be dealt with 2015 as part of that review as well?
The abundant clarity to the public on that plan is something that we heard about through the D&D land when it went forward, and that is something that I think we just as staff need to take back, so that that presentation material that goes before council and our community is very clear in what is part and parcel with a development plan. So you're not going to find that in the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan or the North Oakville Strategic Management Plan report back, but that is something that you're going to see moving forward, that development plans are abundantly clear as to the public and to council what is part and parcel with their approval.
Okay, and then another portion of that we had asked for was to look at not only penalties but incentives for developers. And I know Councillor Duddick brought that up at CSC as well. So is that something that we're looking at independently or part of the urban strategic? Where is that part of it fitting in?
So in the North Oakville Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, there was an incentive in there for preserving trees by giving developments 1.5 times credit for every tree that was preserved in their canopy computation. As a starting point, that will be reviewed as part of the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, and it may be something different when we deal with the lands to the south. I think it's highly important to encourage preservation of trees, in particular to the south where we have the more mature canopy. I'm not so sure adhering to the North Oakville plans to the south is appropriate, and we may need to improve that. So that part about compensation to entice preservation is part of the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan update.
Okay, and in terms of education, both for staff and the public, there was a gentleman who came to CSC, and he's one of our residents in Ward 2, talking about a driveway. And I'm wondering where the driveway is moved and a permit was given, but as a result of moving that driveway, a mature tree has to come down. So how do we deal with the education component of that, where the permit comes in and I'm wondering, before that permit is granted, does the staff review the tree there and talk to the residents about maybe you could look at not doing that and moving it over 6 feet so we keep the tree? Or how do we deal with those when they come in?
So on that, if I wanted to use that particular issue that was discussed at CSC, there were a number of elements that came into play on that particular property. Most notably was the owner's ability to implement the notification process and remove 4 trees, as my colleague Mr. Mark said, by simply faxing in a form that says, I wish to take those down. Essentially, he was entitled to remove 4 trees from his property through that process. What staff are proposing to change in the private tree bylaw is to take that notification of the 4 freebies out. With respect to the driveway and where it is placed, the owner would have to have a driveway permit to put a new driveway out onto municipal road. We would certainly assess any impacts to trees, be denying a permit if it took out a public tree, and we'd have to look at the safety implications of putting a driveway in that location. Is it the preferred way to go? But in particular on that property, the owner was able to remove a tree by simply using the notification process. And that's probably the most important issue here this evening, is we are proposing to remove that from the private tree bylaw and make every tree subject to a permit and have that very discussion that you are suggesting with an owner. Is that ideal for the tree? Would you look at alternate methods? Would you look at developing your land in a different way?
Okay, that's great. And my other questions are for Chris Mark. If you could go back to the chart that you had on page 16, it was the canopy loss chart. I wondered 2 things. Could we get a copy of the charts that you have in here?
Certainly.
And also, does that chart include the ones that are removed because they're hazards or have EAB? I know the one on the next page does not, but I'm just wondering if this one includes those.
Yeah, we would have removed any hazard trees and any EAB-related trees.
Sorry. One of the things that we had talked about and hasn't really been included in here is some of the things to incentivize people to plant. So I know you and I talked about the thing they did in London, the Million Tree Challenge, and so the municipality offers a reduced rate. Have we included any of that into this review so that when people are cutting down trees, we're incentivizing them not just to replace them when they've cut them down, but also in general, just to give residents an incentive to plant more trees on their property?
Certainly, again, that discussion we have with the homeowner, we not only have a discussion with about the removal of the trees and replacing the trees we lose them, but we also have a discussion with them possibly about correctively properly pruning the trees on their property. We speak with them about fertilizing the trees on their property to try and get more vigorous trees on their property. So when we approach a homeowner to talk about a tree permit, we have a fulsome discussion about really all the trees on their property. The whole idea to incentivize is something we certainly can take back and provide some further feedback on, but I think that's really, again, something that's more related to the update of our urban forest strategic management plan, where there is a cost associated with that potentially. We had this discussion also with the ice storm as well, the number of trees that we've lost through the ice storm and also through EAB. When we do come back with a further report on the, the full cost and impact of the ice storm, I think council will see a sizable number of trees that have been impacted, and possibly through that avenue as well, we could make some suggestions or recommendations or some further thoughts on how we could incentivize tree replacement, because between EAB, the ice storm, and other, our urban forests are under attacks from various different angles. So we can discuss it under the private tree bylaw, but I think there's other avenues and other opportunities that we can talk about incentivizing homeowners to plant as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just going back to what Councillor DeMoff was saying about this chart, do we have absolute numbers of, you talk here about the tree canopy, but do we have absolute numbers of how many trees were removed over the 5 years?
Yes, we will have numbers of trees, yes, through the notification process.
We do have that.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I guess the reason I'm saying is 329,000 square meters is a significant amount of loss of tree canopy. And I'm wondering whether or not we have cheaters. In other words, under the notification process, I think the homeowner has to give you 24 hours notice prior to removal of the tree. Within the 24 hours, does someone from our staff actually go out to confirm the veracity of the statement that there was actually within the diameter that's required?
Through you, Your Worship, but no, there's not. It's simply a notification form. People fax it in, and that was one of the important discussions we had when the bylaw first came forward, is that trusting of Oakville residents is very high. We wanted to ensure that people had be able to have a satisfactory use and enjoyment of their properties. So that's why we came forward with the notification form, so that it provided that opportunity. And really, it was also a way for us to collect data and collect information, so that when we come back to council on a night like tonight to discuss the private tree bylaw, we have some solid evidence and data to share with you to give you some direction in terms of how we think the bylaw can be tweaked and improved.
And I appreciate you giving the homeowners a benefit of doubt, but there is a serious concern here when you have 329,000 square meters lost. Does that number, the canopy, jive with what you know as the absolute numbers are removed? Is it consistent with what we believe?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not going to say that there's not individuals out there who have removed a tree and not accurately recorded the DBH of the tree, because it's important when people submit the notification form, they give us the DBH and we rely on them telling us the truth, and that's the information that we use. It is possible that there has been some issues and some opportunities to change that number to work it to one's advantage. I would say that is always possible. I will tell you, Council, that when we do receive a notification form, when it's in that 70 centimeter range, 69, 70, 71, if we can, we do go out and have a look, and we actually do take a measurement of the tree. And we have dealt with some individuals who have played a little fast and loose with the notification form.
So how do you, I suspect it's an aerial shot, but how do you actually measure that it's 329,000 square meters if you don't really know the size of the tree? How did we come to that conclusion? Is it a guesstimate? Is it what we had 5 years ago and what we have now and our growth, or how is that done?
It's simply a logarithm arithmetic calculation that we've done based on the species of tree, the diameter of the tree that the people have responded to. There is an arithmetic way that we can actually determine what the canopy of that tree was.
lastly, and I'm not sure if this is even a viable solution, but you talked earlier about replacement trees. I think it was one tree for every 10 centimeters lost. Are there other municipalities that are doing not the replacement of trees, but the actual replacement of the canopy? So in other words, they have to replace an equivalent canopy that was lost.
Through your worship, I don't believe there's anybody out there replacing square meter for square meter. In some cases, that cost is astronomical and maybe far and exceed the cost of the pool that they're putting in or the shed that they're building. We've tried to take the approach of compensation being what is reasonable, and I think we have shown that already through criterion indicators methodology that we use to determine a rating for a tree. But again, for greater transparency, we think 1 per 10 centimeters, which is also within other bylaws as well. We think that's the fairest and the most reasonable approach to take, so that people reading the bylaw can again make that determination before they even put a tree permit forward, how much it's going to cost them in terms of compensation. And they, again, hopefully they may think twice about actually removing the tree, which would benefit all of us.
I said lastly last time, but what kind of, in terms of enforcement, what is the maximum penalty that we've handed out for any sort of infractions to our bylaw?
Through your worship, I believe we have had a judgment in favor of the town of $5,000.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, you mentioned that when a developer comes in, some use a circle to signify the tree and others identify it in the proper way. What's the proper way to identify a location of a tree?
The proper way would be to have it in its exact location, pinpointing the center of the tree, and to represent the actual diameter of the trunk and the drip line of the tree on a plan.
All right. Thank you very much. And Mr. Mark, the Councillor Khan talked about the notification process, and it seems to be that, you know, you do follow up in terms of the 76 width or diameter. What's your sense of how many trees we lose as a result of somebody just running out with a chainsaw and don't go through the process?
Through your worship, it's tough to put a number on it.
It does happen,
It
though.
does, for sure, it does happen. I would say that Oakville residents are very conscientious when a chainsaw starts. On a couple of weeks ago, down at Marine Drive, a company was out working and immediately a call went into Mayor Burton's office. Trees are coming down, what's going on? We went out and we did investigate, and the person was doing absolutely everything correct. So is there trees coming down on the weekend without notification permits? Sure there are, yes.
But we can't identify the effect that has.
That's very tough, because often you go out there and the tree's gone and the stump is gone.
All right. And secondly, you were talking about encouraging preservation. Similar to Councillor DeMoff, it's incredibly important to encourage planting as well. Through the scope of the discussions and the feedback from the community, will you be talking about native species and the need, and whether we can not regulate that but highly encourage the planting of native species?
Through your worship, certainly, absolutely. Every opportunity we can to promote native tree planting and species, we do that. On our UFAR document that's on the website, there again is the top 10, if you will, trees that we can plant here in Oakville that provides the best environmental ecological benefit for the town. So anytime we have an opportunity to engage people and have a discussion about whether it's tree removal or tree planting, native species is certainly high on our list for that part of the discussion.
And so the private tree refresh, if I can call it that, will be this year, and the U4 will be next year. And so in terms of incenting residents to plant additional trees, would that be coming through a sneak peek at that this year, or will that be in next year's with the U4 report?
Again, I think we did make a commitment that when we came back with our report on the ice storm in terms of the amount of tree damage and tree loss we experienced in the community, we did commit to coming back with some ideas for council on some options for them. I would hope we would bring that report back well ahead of budget committee so that we could have that discussion, and then if council so chooses, they could forward that information on to budget committee for further deliberation there if necessary. I think it also would be a discussion when we come back for a discussion of the results of the U4 in terms of what is our current canopy. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a suggestion that we should do more tree planting based on the U4 results, and part of that needs to be done by the private realm. In terms of the public planting, we can only do so much, but we really have to rely on the residents and the private community to also step up and plant as well.
Thank you very much. You knew where I was going with that one.
Are there other questions for staff? I wonder if I could ask staff to put slide, I'd like to see the next slide. And I'd just point out that you seem to have tree counts here.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what...
That's just for 2013.
So if you could go to the next slide now. This also seems to be only for 2013.
Yes.
But what caught my eye here is that a 38% gain is nothing to sneeze at, however much I may be sneezing tonight from this cold. What was it like in the previous years? Had you done this for each year, what would it look like?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I would say that in the earlier years, it was not so prominent, but as we became accustomed to the bylaw and using the bylaw, we have been able to achieve greater results based on the canopy replacement. But I really think it's in 2012, 2013 that we've really started to make a concerted, I mean, really with the EAB coming in 2009, 2010, it's really obviously put a different whole slant on our urban forest, and I think our staff are much more diligent now in terms of the canopy replacement value than ever.
Okay, and are you exploring changes to the bylaw that would elevate your degree of success from 38% to a number that's higher?
Certainly that is something that we can look at, absolutely.
Will you, when you present it to us, be able to suggest some kind of target range for what you would be able to achieve with the improvements that you're thinking about?
Yes, certainly.
I think council, I'm pretty sure everyone on council regards the discovery that the existing bylaw had a little bit of persuasive value in it to get to this level. I'm pretty sure we all regard this as a good thing. And I don't want to break it, but I would like more of that. And I think council would agree with me on that. So this is one of the bright spots of the report for me. All right, I thank you for that. I'll look for a motion to receive, or I'll look for the motion from Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Adams. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is adopted. We did the balance of CSC already, and that allows us to move ahead to the consent items, of which there are none. And we will now proceed to the discussion item on tonight's agenda, which is the report from Economic Development on the prospects for Sheridan College adding university status to its other claims to fame. Ms. St. George, council is all ears.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. The report before you is in support of Sheridan College's initiative to become a university. As a university, Sheridan will provide an expanded scope and depth of study with a focus on applied learning. Its bachelor degree programs will offer students more opportunities for those seeking future employment, as well as those wishing to pursue graduate studies at other universities. Members of council, you are well aware that Sheridan has campuses in Brampton, Oakville, and Mississauga. To date, Brampton and Peel councils have formally endorsed Sheridan's initiative, and Halton Council will consider their request next month. Here tonight is Dr. Jeff Sabudsky, President and CEO of Sheridan College, to provide further information to Council in support of this request.
Welcome, Dr. Zabudsky. Council is looking forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. St. George. And members of Council, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today and look forward to the dialogue that will follow what will make a brief presentation. But I did want the opportunity to present to you some of the rationale, the background, the history that's brought us to where we are today and where we foresee the institution in the relatively near future. So yeah, that's the one. So that's the lesson. I should always bring one of my technology students with me wherever I go because they would never have any issues. But anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity. What I want to talk to you about is a vision that's been identified, created by Sheridan and its Board of Governors that was approved by the board just over 2 years ago. Which has been in a gestation period, a lot of internal activity, a lot of internal work in terms of readiness, which I want to talk a little bit about in my presentation. This is the year that we decided, as we were making very good progress internally, to have more of a dialogue externally, to make sure that we're raising awareness about where we're going, seek support, answer questions, and move towards more of an external dialogue. And today is a very important day in that direction. So I want to give you a little bit of background on Sheridan and what has brought us to where we are today. But the campus in Oakville opened in 1970. In fact, we were established by an act of the legislature in 1967. And so we're fast approaching our 50th birthday, and the best known of our campuses for many of those and all of those decades has been our Oakville campus, from whence many very successful programs has grown, many successful graduates have come. At the time, in 1970, we had 1,854 full-time students, and the focus was on arts and community services programming. Today, we've grown significantly. We have across all of our campuses, almost 20,000 full-time students. We are, as noted, in 3 robust communities in the Western GTA. We are known, as you will all know, well known, as a world leader in animation, gaming, and design. In fact, a survey that was conducted a couple of years ago by a major industry association, drawing on Princeton Review data, identified that the second most prestigious school of animation in the world was this California School of the Arts, which was started by none other than Roy and Walter Disney to feed their industry. The number one institution known in this sector was Sheridan. So further validation of where we have been and where we continue to be. We are also home to the Canadian Music Theatre Project, fostering homegrown talent and stories, homegrown development of Canadian music theatre productions. We now have the only music theatre degree in Canada, which is a huge success. That's still a growing degree. The students in that program, and you're in 3 of a 4-year program. Next year will be our first graduates from that renowned program. We have innovative programming. We're always looking at programs that push the margins, that constantly are looking for where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. And in that regard, we launched a new degree this year in interaction design. And don't ask me what that means, but the smart people within our faculty and our students know what it's all about. It's about technology and screen technology, wearable computing, gesture-based computing. They're doing actually some remarkable things. But it shows that we're not standing still. Our programs have always grown and developed
to meet the needs of industry and our communities. And we're developing talent for the creative and knowledge economies. It's not just good enough today to deliver a graduate who can do the jobs of today. We need to prepare graduates with the creative instincts, the creative problem-solving ability to manage the jobs of tomorrow. And in fact, we know that today's students are graduating into what will be multiple careers. In our Oakville campus, I mentioned across all of our campuses we have 20,000 students. In Oakville today we have 8,000 full-time students, and with further capital development plans we'll see those numbers grow. Just to highlight the breakdown in the student population base, we have, as you can see, considerable growth over the years. In roughly the last 10 years, we've doubled in terms of our full-time student enrollment. What this graph is showing is 13 and 14, which is this year, but then based on our enrollment plan, which is more than just a plan, we're actually in the midst of implementing those degrees, those new programs. This gets us to 2021, you can see further considerable growth. So we're just under 20,000 full-time students. By the time 2020 rolls around, we'll be about 23 to 24,000 full-time students with the new programs that we have. One area where we've seen remarkable increase in student growth has been international students. That's the red color that you're seeing grow. We have close to 4,000 students now who are studying on a student international visa. When we began, or even just I began just a scant close to 5 years ago, we had 500 students on an international visa. It's now grown to 4,000 students. And to make sure that this mythology is busted forever, international students don't take seats away from domestic students. In fact, because we have international students, we're in a position to actually add infrastructure, because international students pay the full freight, and we're actually able to add cohorts of sections that we couldn't afford to do otherwise. So for instance, by bringing 20 students internationally into a program, we can add a cohort of 30 students, which means we can add extra seats for domestic students that we wouldn't otherwise be funded to do. So international students are very much at the core of the growth that we've seen at our institution. We have to talk a little bit about how Sheridan is positioned appropriately to take the next step to become a university. A lot of people equate universities with big and colleges as small. And it's not actually the reality. There are a lot of small universities out there, but a lot of people view it that way. So just to put us in that context, if you were to look at the 20 universities in Ontario, and on this graph, I'm only showing the top 13 in terms of enrollment. Sheridan would be number 9, so it would be in the top 10 of the universities in our system, ahead of some institutions that you will well know, Carleton, Queen's, Wilfrid Laurier. So we have the scale and the size that's almost often associated with what a university is. We also are seeing, as already noted, a growth in our enrollment numbers. What I wanted to show here was the growth in our bachelor's degrees. Sheridan was provided with the authority back in the early 2000s to start to grant bachelor's degrees. And we have been one of the fastest out of the gates of all of the colleges, and by far one of the most, amongst the most successful in terms of growing those bachelor's programs. So as you can see, based on our enrollment plan, we've seen in purple strong growth in our degree programming. But that is being compounded exponentially over the next few years as the new degrees that we have are now being offered and are being fully subscribed and fully grown out to the point where we'll see that considerable growth in our degree programs. The bachelor's degree is the bread and butter of what a university is. So as you can see, we'll continue to offer a range of credentials from the diploma in red, the advanced diplomas in green, but absolutely a growing in the numbers of bachelor's students to the point where we'll have about 50% of our student population in the degree programs. And that's one of the things that warrants our moving towards becoming a university with all the status that comes with that for our students who graduate from degree programs, and the opportunity then to carry on to further education in other institutions if they so choose in graduate programs. Just to highlight our faculty preparation, Sheridan absolutely leads the way in the college system by far In terms of the readiness of our faculty for teaching at the university level, 70% of our faculty are prepared to the graduate level. And that number is increasing exponentially, has been, and continues to do so. So our faculty are ready, and we continue to hire faculty as we hire faculty with those credentials, but also preparing through a robust professional development program faculty within the organization to progress to those levels of academic preparation. We are seen and viewed as one of the top colleges for undergraduate research, what we often call applied research, which is research that we do in collaboration with our partners in industry and in the field of practice. This year we have grown to more than $4 million in investment from multiple levels of government as well as the private sector in research. And this is research that students are directly involved in. This is not research that's isolated to the faculty only. This is applied research where students are solving problems in industry, and we've seen great growth in this area to the point where in a survey that was done this past year of Canada's top 50 research colleges, Sheridan came out number 1 in Ontario and number 6 in Canada, so we've still got some room to grow to prevail nationally, but we are number 1 in Ontario. We're also pursuing accreditation, and one of the parts of this journey that's very important to us to become Sheridan University is to seek membership in the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada. And in Canada, in the absence of accrediting bodies as they have in the US, what we have is this organization called the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada, for which we are seeking entry. And there are a series of requirements that we have to put in place in order to be a member. But in the absence of a true national accrediting body, AUCC is viewed as the proxy for accreditation. And it's to that body that many registrars in the traditional university environment look when our students seek entry into a graduate program. So when students want to get into grad school, where they've graduated from is looked at, obviously, and most registrars in the traditional university environment are looking for membership in AUCC. And that's very much behind why we're advancing towards AUCC membership, because we want, in this world of lifelong learning, our graduates from our degree programs never to have a barrier placed in front of them, that they can continue on and study wherever they might like in this province or anywhere in this country. But with that, we're also seeking accreditation and membership in other organizations, and these identify some of them. CDIO is an engineering accreditation body, which we were admitted into only in the last year. We're the only college in the world that's a member. It started out of MIT. Many other prestigious institutions are members. And most recently, we gained access to the National Association of Schools of Art and Design, particularly relevant for our programs and our faculty here in Oakville. And we are only the second institution in Canada to be admitted to this association, which is based out of the United States. Emily Carr School of Art and Design in BC is the first, and we were the second. So we're the only Ontario school. Our students are successful. This is just a snippet of the things that we've won recently. Students named national and provincial champions in co-op education awards. We won that 2 years in a row. Another organization awarded us an Apps to Empower contest. Our student won that. Our students placed second in an international business ethics competition at Queen's University. Our interactive multimedia students created an innovative app, and Cisco awarded them a $10,000 prize. And our business students recently won the Silver Award at the Vanier BDC Case Challenge, our business students. So our students continue to succeed and are consistently awarded. And of course, institutionally, we're constantly monitoring what's going on in Hollywood, and we continue to lead the way there. We won in this past Academy Awards 2 Scientific and Technical Academy Awards. 31 of our alumni worked on 8 Oscar-nominated films, Frozen and those kinds of films. 14 Canadian Screen Awards were awarded to Sheridan grads just recently. We won our illustration graduate won a very prestigious Inspire Award, and Our students, our alumni recently produced a wonderful production called Blame Canada that debuted to great success on Broadway. So we continue to make waves, and we believe for that reason it's time for Sheridan to make its next step. And this has not been a journey that is just overnight. Sheridan began, as noted, almost 50 years ago. The legislation in Ontario was amended back in 2003 to create Sheridan Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning. It's a long title. What it means is that we got further authority to grant more degrees than we had previously had, so that the journey has been a long one, and it's been an evolution towards this vision. And this vision is to become Sheridan University. The words are chosen very carefully, celebrated as a global leader, and in many respects we're already acknowledged globally. In undergraduate, and that's been our focus, and that's frankly what Ontario needs, what in particular the GTA needs, is more undergraduate capacity. We're positioned to step up to address that. And also, the focus on professional education is a broad definition of professional that indicates to you that we continue to be connected to the field of practice. So this isn't about becoming another Queen's or another U of T with the great education that they offer, but at a more academic level, at a more, in some respects, more theoretical level. Our focus is on applied learning, learning that gets you a job, but learning that provides you opportunities to progress to further education if you so choose. So we're not throwing away Sheridan's great legacy. We're building on the fine legacy of Sheridan and becoming an even stronger institution as Sheridan University. So, so Your Worship and Council, I'm here today seeking your endorsement, your support of this exciting future for Sheridan, a future that will continue to see us growing and thriving in the great town of Oakville. And I'm happy to bring this to you today to answer any of your questions, and again, as I noted, to seek your support.
Thank you very much, President Zabetsky. You have questions. And I'll just say that Sheridan, the university that calls itself a college, has made its host communities very proud already. And Councillor Khan, you were first, then Councillor Knoll, and then Councillor Lapworth, if I didn't miss anybody. All right, Councillor Khan.
Well, thank you very much for that exciting presentation. It's exciting for Sheridan. Obviously, it's very exciting for Oakville as well, and us on council. And I suspect that you'll get a unanimous endorsement. But tell me what this endorsement means. How does this play out in the process, and how long do you anticipate the timeline will be? What will be the timeline?
So through you, Your Worship, it's a very good question, and two things have to happen. One of the things that you have to do is you have to put in place the features that make a recognized university in Canada. And those are the features that are associated with AUCC that I already spoke about. So it's the investments in our library, it's the preparation of our faculty, it's hitting about a 50% mark of students in baccalaureate programs. It's a governance structure. We've introduced a Senate to our organization to give a stronger voice to our faculty in terms of the leadership. So that's very important to happen. You can't go to your provincial government and say, we want to be a university, in my mind, without having credibility behind it. And Sheridan has great credibility to move from where we are today to where we anticipate being tomorrow. The second thing we have to do is to be acknowledged as a university, and that requires provincial legislation. And so that is a part of why I'm here today, because I want to be able to demonstrate to our provincial government that our local communities, our businesses, the organizations that we serve, our students, and our municipalities see the value in Sheridan taking this next step and being there to support us when we make that overture to the provincial government. So the province at this point is in the loop. Obviously, I've met with my board chair, with the premier, with the minister. Our local MPPs are familiar with this journey that we're on. And it is now that we are starting to turn in a more forthright manner to our provincial government to ask and negotiate and discuss with them the nature of the legislative pieces that have to change. So we believe that within 2 years, we're in a position to pass, if I can put it that way, the membership criteria for AUCC. That puts us in a very good position to say, we look like a university, we act like a university, we're talking like a university. We're now positioning ourselves to be a university. So it's at this point that we're turning our attention more to our external constituencies, but beginning the conversation in a more forthright, deliberate way with the province around the amendments that have to happen. There are a number of ways we can get that. I won't get into the detail today. We could get our own charter. We could get legislation that creates shared university. However, there are other ways to do it through an omnibus legislation that would admit other institutions into the fold at some point. Amendments could be made to the current legislation under which we are governed, the CAT Act, that would allow us to become shared university under the Colleges of Applied Arts and Technology Act in the same way as we're currently in ITEL under that same act. So within 2 years, we'll be positioned to say we're ready for accreditation. I'm hopeful that by that time, or closely proximate to that time, the province will be in a position to introduce legislation or amendments to the legislation through amendments to regulation to create shared university.
With respect to AUCC,
Yep.
is that an application that's made? Is that there's a certain criterion you have to meet, or will you start the application in 2 years? And my other question is, with respect to your other campuses, will they be campuses of Sheridan University when it's all completed, or will they have separate components, or how is that structure going to play out?
So a great question. What we're looking at is we're following very closely some of the transformations that occurred in other institutions across Canada. So most recently in BC and Alberta, a number of colleges became universities. They did, as we are, seeking to line themselves up with the criteria for AUCC accreditation. But then negotiating and talking with their provincial government about the appropriate kind of legislation. And we're not locked in, we're not dogmatic about what that legislation needs to look like. It should be something that meets our needs, but also meets the provincial needs, and may also provide a place that would embrace other institutions as well. So to be clear, one of the things that it's very important for me to impress is that Sheridan isn't talking about losing a whole bunch of programming because we're becoming a university. So the trades will continue. In fact, last week our Senate approved a new program, a technology diploma in plumbing. So we're going to continue to serve our communities with those programs. But we also want the recognition that will come with university accreditation as well as the legislation. And this is somewhat of a new model for Ontario, this hybrid model that I've described, but it's working. It's working in other parts of the world. Finland has the polytechnics. Western Canada has the hybrid institutions. And we believe that we can build on that model and continue to serve our communities. But ensure that our students are not disenfranchised, that the degrees that they take away from our institution provides them pathways to further learning in any institution, whether it be in Ontario or anywhere else in the world. And I also would make the point this is not unprecedented in Ontario. The model we're describing is somewhat unique, but you'll all be familiar with the journey that Ryerson took. It's been only upward and onward for Ryerson when they moved from a Polytechnic Institute to becoming a university. Most recently, OCAD, a college, became OCAD-U. And then you've got the examples of the federated colleges that became universities, Algoma University, Nipissing University, and then a brand new university in the Eastern GTA, UOIT. So it's timely that we're talking about the Western GTA. Thanks.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. I'm very excited about this proposal. I remember when I went to the Ministry of Education as a political staffer back in 1995, one of the first meetings I took was with Mary Hofstetter, who outlined this grand vision, and it's really interesting to see it come to this point today. I think it's taking a little longer than she originally anticipated, but it's very exciting to see it almost at the point of completion. My question is very similar to the one actually, Councillor Khan usually asks all my questions, but the one in particular that I think resulted in your answer that you're not necessarily going to eliminate programs as a result of the degree granting status. That was going to be the number one nature of my question, because I know that when community colleges were created, they were created with a very specific goal in mind, to create an alternative form of education for people that might not necessarily either want to go to university or may not have the aptitude or the scholastic aptitude to enter more academic studies. And so that's why community colleges were created back in that day, and for trades and such. As colleges move towards this degree granting desire, this want to be able to provide bachelor programs, is this more an evolution of education, or is it in terms of there's not as much of a distinction between academic and non-academic institutions, or is this creep? Like, is this basically eliminating that alternative that has existed for so long, for a couple generations now, as an alternative to you know, the Ivy League, so to speak? And I think about programs like the ECE program, for example, which would probably never qualify for a bachelor's degree. Programs like that are critical in our community, but wouldn't necessarily fall within a university context.
Yeah. No, a very good question. In fact, ECE continues to be a robust and strong diploma for us, but we also have a very successful degree program in leadership in early childhood education. So it shows there is the reality, and whether you like it or not, that many, many more fields of practice are requiring the degree as entry to practice. And the horse is out of the gate on that in many areas. Accounting as a profession requires a degree. Nursing, as we know, quite a number of years ago moved in that direction. To be a member of HRPAO, you need to have a degree now. These were all things that for us were at the diploma level. So if I'm not acknowledging where the field of practice is going, I'm doing a disservice to my students. So in some respects, I'm trying to keep up, and that we need certain areas to move to degree programs. For instance, students in our diploma program in animation would not have got study visas to go to Hollywood if they wanted to go to DreamWorks or Disney without a degree. It was a requirement to get a study visa. And so a number of things are happening in our environment that we're leading towards. The other point I would make is that the system is very different now than it was in 1967. And the reality is, I think a lot of our structures haven't caught up to where the system actually is today. So in 1967, you had a very few what were considered the elite university institutions that were only for this group of people. And the rest would go to a place that would give them the skills that they would need to get a job and then work in that job for 35 years, get a gold watch, and retire. Well, the reality is there are many more universities now that are not like those early 6 elite institutions that very much in their own way have an access mandate. So it's really not anymore, if I can use this terminology, the best and the rest. It's really institutions, more institutions growing to take on new and unique mandates. So there will continue to be institutions that will offer a range of different programs that were intended to offer more of an access mandate. And there will continue to be the elite universities doing the research, what I would call the medical doctoral research institutions, but there's a whole range of evolving institutions in the middle. And so I think that we have to acknowledge the system is quite different now than it was. But to put your mind at rest, we do have elite programs that are very hard to get into. Musical theater, animation. We're proud of those programs. But we're not leaving behind the many programs that we know that our communities continue to need. Early childhood education, police foundations, our degree programs and the diploma programs in business. So we'll continue to walk that balance to address the needs of our communities. And responding to those communities' needs through our boards of governors, which provides me that direction, and they're made up of community members. But we're allowing ourselves to grow and our students to get the recognition that they so deserve at the same time as we serve our communities.
So, you mentioned earlier that part of your process is to seek advice and endorsements from various constituent groups, so municipalities, and you mentioned students. How have the students taken this? And the reason I ask this, I'll give you the background for this question. You are aware, because you and I have a couple conversations about this, that I come in contact with a lot of media arts students through various things that I do, and I've actually heard some of the media arts students concerned that their program is going to go from 3 to 4 years, and that's extra cost, and it takes longer time to get through the system. I mean, they obviously see the advantages, but they're concerned about the impact on their educational plans. How have your students reacted to this? Because clearly it's the ones that's going to impact the most isn't the municipality, it's going to be your customers, your students.
Yeah, the response that I've received from students, from our student government, has been very positive. Now, what you've identified would be areas where specific concerns might be raised. I would say that what we're trying to do, except in those areas where it's clear the industry is requiring the degree as an entry to practice, that's where we have to go. What we've been working on are models that create the opportunity for a student to exit at 2 years with a diploma or to carry on to the degree program. So for perfect example is our business degrees. They were just all approved last year, and that has the option for a student to come in to the program and have a track on to a bachelor's degree, and then maybe an MBA or wherever they choose to go, or to exit at 2 years with the skills that they would need to get a job and be on to their career. But building lots of latitude for a student then after they work for a while to come back and carry on. We just see ourselves in how we've structured ourselves as that hybrid institution as a real kind of hub of learning and a place where students can transfer in and then transfer out to a job or transfer out to further learning as they choose. So, we're trying to make sure that students who want that short kind of programming that we've always been so well known for aren't disenfranchised. And the other point I would make, finances is hugely important. We still offer an incredible return on investment. Our tuition, both at the degree level and at the diploma level, is considerably below the traditional university. Our cost to government is considerably below the traditional university. And the reason for that is our focus is on teaching. Our focus is in the classroom. And a lot of the traditional universities in Ontario have a teaching and research mandate which increases their cost, which means that cost gets transferred on to governments and to students. So what we're positioning, and we've been positioning to the provincial government, is this is a way to get more undergraduate capacity, more bachelor seats, because we know that's where the demand is in the GTA right now, but at a very cost-effective price for students and for the provincial government. But that's a little tangential to your point. I acknowledge there may be nervousness in some areas, but broadly speaking, the endorsement of the students has been very strong. In fact, just got evidence of that. Recently, one of our MPPs in another community is introducing a petition that she would like to bring to the legislature. And I think at last count, we're somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 signatures, wet signatures on that petition. And that's largely from internal constituency and obviously largely from our students. So the evidence is showing us that there's strong support, but we need to work with the students on those particular areas where there might be some concern.
That's terrific. Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd love the privilege, if nobody's already asked for it, to move this motion when it's the time.
It's yours, Councillor. Councillor Lapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Badowski, thank you for your presentation this evening, and thank you for your personal enthusiasm in moving this matter forward. Oakville has always said youth first, and of course an educational facility will be a huge plus, for our town. And Harry Barrett, on many occasions, past Mayor Barrett, said that Oakville is a city, acts like a town, and so acts like a village and calls itself a town. However, to add a university will be a huge bonus to that. Now, my question is from a different standpoint, from the educational side, from Councillor Khan and Councillor Noel here. Oakville Council wants to make Oakville the most livable town in Canada. I was wondering if there's any way that you could work the name Oakville into the title, because if you go back to your list of 13 universities, most of them are preceded by a town or a city name. An example would be call yourself maybe the University of Oakville, and then you have Sheridan Campus, Trafalgar, Sheridan Campus, Iroquois, Sheridan Campus, Brampton, and Sheridan Campus, Mississauga.
Well, thank you very much for that observation. It's a good one, and it's not something we'd had as yet talked about, but if there are ways that we can, through our branding, better reflect the communities that we serve, I think that would be a fine thing for us to do. And given the anticipated support from the community, I would be happy to take that back and look at ways of better promoting the communities that we serve. Very good point. Thank you.
I think we all agree that certainly that Sheridan has a global name for animation amongst other of its major programs, but I appreciate your thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. You have my complete and utter endorsement. I think it's a great plan that you've presented to us. Sheridan has been great for the community. I think it'll be even greater for the community going forward. It's great for the not only for the students, but the families that are around. I know many people who are very pleased that their kids can stay in the community and not have to travel far afield to attend a university or college. And so I think that for all of those reasons, the plan is great. I think the community is substantial enough to withhold the pressures that come with being a university town, and I look forward to that work. And I'm sure that all of our friends in Peel would like to know that they're really just a satellite of Oakville in the future. So you have my endorsement. I look forward to continuing to work with you on all of the endeavors that are to come. I know that you've been putting together a good plan, and I look forward to supporting that at other locations. I think you're going to come to the region for our support there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Thank you, President Zabudsky. Councillor Knoll has moved the item. Councillor Grant has seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that does carry. Congratulations. Go forth and celebrate.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Council, we have no other discussion items. You have your information items circulated electronically, and you have your report on the status of outstanding issues. Is there any new business for us tonight? Councillor DeMoff?
I actually have a question about the status of outstanding issues, if I could.
Please go ahead.
I had the privilege, along with a number of other councillors, to tour the new Oakville Hospital this past week, and it really is quite spectacular. One of the things in our number one on the list is a new Oakville Hospital project updates from the CAO, and I'm wondering if at a fairly soon council meeting coming up, if we could get a new report from the CAO on that. It's been some time, and that included, how we're going to pay for it and everything else to do with it. So I'm just wondering when we could expect, or if we could get a status update in the near future.
Actually, Mr. Lalonde and myself are working on an update to come forward to council, which fulfills a direction that was given by this council in 2010, which talks about potential funding sources. There's also a requirement for Oakville Hydro to provide comments, so we're intending that probably in the August-September timeframe, but before this council recesses.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council is aware, Oakville is a proud FIRST robotics community. FIRST Robotics' mission is to show students at every age that science, technology, and problem solving are not only fun, but rewarding. And gracious professionalism is the guiding principle of FIRST Robotics. And over the past several weeks, Oakville teams have been in Timmins, Waterloo, and Pittsburgh, and they have done Oakville very proud. The Oakville Trafalgar Red Devils had a great weekend and deserve recognition for achieving the highest award going, the Regional Chairman's Award in Waterloo. We're proud to see that team mentor Pat Decker won the coveted Woody Flowers Award in North Bay, and that is an incredible honor for Pat. And St. Mildred's, congratulations on another Chairman's Award that was earned this past weekend in Pittsburgh. Our Oakville teams are getting around. Team 771 from St. Mildred's also won the Team Spirit Award, and student Laura Lee was a Dean's List finalist. Holy Trinity had a great weekend as they were quarterfinalists and won the Innovation in Control Award. And Krista Peralta was named a Dean's List finalist. King's Christian Collegiate were quarterfinalists as well. And as Dr. Zabudsky mentioned about the jobs of tomorrow, I'd like to thank all the educators and mentors, volunteers, and parents for helping prepare our youth for these jobs. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giddings. Anyone else? I have a small item. We were visited today by the cancer folks for the launch of their daffodil campaign. Tomorrow is April Fool's. And Hillary McKenzie in the Office of Mayor and Council has been beavering away on the daffodil file and had, as of today, collected $344 for daffodils as a result of the uptake by town staff. And they asked me if I would please give each of you a daffodil tonight. And what they're hoping you will do is you'll put it on and we'll have a wide shot, and they would like to use that picture in their further promotion. So if I could ask Dave to pass out these 5 on your side, and if I could ask Roger to pass these out on your side. And when you're suitably pinned, if you felt like standing up to give the best possible display of your daffodil, that would be great. It's a fine-looking bunch of daffodils. And I can see the shot. We just need, there we go. So you can wave now. Thank you very much. I appreciate the gesture, and so does Cancer Society. I'll now ask you if there are any regional reports or questions for town boards and advisory committees. Seeing none. Are there any requests for reports? Seeing none. Could I have a mover and seconder for the bylaws? Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Adams. This is for consideration and reading of the bylaws that are listed in the agenda, too numerous to mention tonight. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes our agenda. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.